Plant cryptids are a group of cryptids that really haven't gotten the attention they deserve, especially not hybrid plant cryptids, but the Squasholiger really should have done, for the many reasons I'm about to explain to you now. The Squasholiger is a fearsome critter that's not only part animal, usually identified as part tiger, lion or hog, it's also said to be a species of squash too. That is, it's part plant, part flesh and blood creature. In very specific cases, it's said to grow from well-cared-for veggie patches, and can be purposefully cultivated by humans in this regard. And like an actual squash from the garden, it starts off green, then turns yellow over time, maturing until it distinctly resembles a humanoid. In the final phase of this development, it actually grows legs, grows eyes, grows a face and grows a mouth. And after these few days, these Squasholigers, unless you restrain them, will actually wander off into the surrounding forest to start their lives and do typical animal things. First order of business, however, is that these creatures are literally plants, so they're all growing off of a vine. This requires them to walk away from the vine and all pull on it collectively until it snaps, or maybe one individual one pull on it very strongly to go its own way. The part of the vine they once grew from will then wither away, and the part that's still attached to them each will become their curly pig-like tail. Well, I'm actually not sure if it's curly or not, but either way, it becomes a tail, some depictions depict it in one way, some in another way. During their life in the wild, these Squasholigers are meant to be fairly reclusive. They do, however, skulk around logging camps, small farms and houses that have livestock due to one specific reason: the high insect population in those areas. The Squasholiger feeds on insects, and presumably grubs, and it's widely said among lumberjacks to be its sole diet, and in fact to be vastly helpful to them, since it helps in keeping the bug numbers down. So dichotomously, the squashes keep down the bugs, but because they're said to be a leafy dark green in colour, they're very seldom seen. It's said that you have to squint very hard to find them. However, the farmers didn't mind that at all, neither their colour nor their insect eating, and are said to still not mind it, and said to explicitly let them run wild for this very reason. We find in Yarns of the Big Woods by Art Childs, a fascinating Lumberjack Cryptid book, the following. Across the lake was a neat little cabin where an old timer lived all the year round. He raised quite a crop of vegetables, which he sold to campers. The old guard took the tenderfoot over to him on a vegetable buying trip. We'd like a couple of those fan squashes of yours. I've noticed lately that they're coming along great, remarked the guide. The wrinkled old woodsman shook his head. I'm sorry, but they're long gone. Those were the Squasholiger variety, you know. Oh, sure, nodded the guide. That's the walking kind, ain't it? Yep, they grow just like any other squash on vines, only heaps larger. And as they ripen, their eyes and legs come out, and their mouth opens, and just before they're ready to walk, a piece of the vine turns into a tail, and presto, off they go. Don't you ever get them? Asked the tenderfoot. Nope. You see, their green colour helps them hide in the undergrowth. But I don't understand losing them, because they stay around the place and live on bugs and insects, you see, so they're considerable help. They're a rare variety, though. Isn't often I raise any of them. And this isn't the only history of these Squasholigers, because we find tales of these cat squashes, as they're sometimes called, as early as 1891 in the book Cat o' Nine Tails, a domestic epic by Hattie Brown and William James Linton, which was written in memory of the latter's cat. There's some prose about a farmer growing tigrine cat squashes, which have superabundant articulated limbs and a stem tail, and they soon break from the stem and go mixed with regular cats. And we also find similar stories in Romanian mythology. It's said that a pumpkin or watermelon that doesn't rot within a month of its ripening will become a vampire, either growing a mouth and teeth or using its vine like a proboscis to suck up blood. So I don't know about that, Chiefs, I don't know, but either way, it does make me laugh a great deal. So what could these Squasholigers really be? Well, I've never heard of a creature not only being part botanical, but also being part tiger, part lion, and part hog, and maybe being three of these, maybe being part botanical and part tiger and part hog, or maybe being part botanical, part lion and part hog. I have never, in my long history of cryptozoology, and by long I mean like 7 years, I have never heard in my long, quote, history of cryptozoology of anything like this. You know, it's... Then again, just because I haven't heard of something doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I hadn't heard of the coelacanth until I learned it had supposedly been extinct for 65 million years, and then was suddenly dredged up off of the coast of Madagascar. I hadn't heard of the Ellsworth Air Force Base UFO incident. I hadn't heard of the Roswell incident. I hadn't heard of the Aztec incident. And yet I believe these things almost certainly happened. Not almost certainly in the sense that we have proof, but I believe they did happen. And I believe that many more provable, wondrous things have happened throughout nature. So Is it possible that some kind of creature exists that's part plant and part flesh and blood life form? God's universe works in incredible ways. If aliens may very well be visiting us, but that's a story for my other podcast, which will be linked in my other playlists, then what on earth else could be happening? So I get that this is a Lumberjack Cryptid, which almost certainly doesn't exist, and I get that the book Yarns of the Big Woods by Art Childs and others were supposed to be satirical, but nonetheless, I do think that creatures like the Squasholiger could exist. However, could they still exist today? Now, that's a whole other question, because think about it this way. In the age of social media cameras, in the age of selfies, in the age of all this kind of thing, you would think that someone had seen the Squasholiger, you would think that someone would have some documentary proof. But then again, they're meant to turn bright green, according to some traditions, and to hide among the leaves like chameleons, which could explain why, if you're in, say, a remote wood in Minnesota where nobody ever goes, and you're just strolling along, maybe you won't see it. Maybe even if you're taking a selfie video, maybe even if you're just strolling along casually with a HD camera, maybe it'll just look like a leaf to you and maybe you won't catch it. Maybe one day we will catch it. Maybe one day someone will provide us proof of this, and I would love that. But what do you guys think? Do any of you have any tales or stories of the Squasholiger? Do any of you have any experiences you've had? Do any of you have anything you could tell me from your own country or culture's faith, traditions, or heritage? Please post that in the comment section below. I would love to hear it. My video on the Beast of Busco got someone who'd actually seen giant turtles. My video on the Burren Jaw got someone posting photos claiming they'd actually seen it. My video on some Sasquatch of some kind got a reply from someone in Louisiana who'd seen the Rougarou, the famous werewolf. So if you have any kind of sighting, just remotely, please do tell it to me. That would be amazing to hear. And I was trying to find other comparisons with this Squasholiger in the world of cryptids, in the world of aliens, in the world of UFOs. I came across the story of the mantis aliens. I came across a story of a man in America who claimed he had witnessed a triangle-shaped UFO land. Now, triangle-shaped UFOs in UFO lore are usually associated with terrestrial things. It's said that they're actually the TR-3B flying triangle, which is piloted by human pilots and is either based off of a nuclear engine or based off of reversed engineered alien technology. But either way, he claimed that, I think he was a farmer, and he claimed that this triangle-shaped craft landed fairly close to him, and he was confronted by some aliens that came out. Now, these weren't just any old aliens, these were giant walking mantises. Yes, these were bipedal walking mantises. Now, I'm not sure if a mantis is actually bipedal in nature. Does it walk on two legs? I'm going to get eviscerated in the comment section by a scientist. But he claimed that he was confronted by these two mantis aliens, which looked like the human version, but much, much bigger. And there are stories that these kind of aliens have been encountered before by military personnel, and it's been covered up. There's, a book by the KGB that's meant to talk about the several different types of aliens visiting the Earth, and mantis aliens are mentioned. Rick Doty, who's a former AFOSI, Air Force Officer Special Investigations agent, claims that mantis aliens have been existing and visiting the planet, but then Doty is a former disinformation agent, so take what Doty says with a pinch of salt. Another thing I've managed to come up with is the Veggie Man. West Virginia at one point allegedly played host to a very, very strange cryptid. And West Virginia's already had the Mothman of Point Pleasant, the Flatwoods Monster in Braxton, but then it had the Veggie Man. The Veggie Man was said to be very tall, over 7 feet, and thin with a semi-human shape. Said to be like a giant walking plant, to have large ears with striking, multicoloured eyes, arms that look like reeds, suction cups on the end of long fingers, which had horns protruding from them. It was incredible. The sighting went in 1968 in the woods around Fairmont. W.V. Jennings Frederick was out for a hunt, and as he moved through the woods, he heard an odd noise. It sounded like some kind of record player running faster than it should, kind of like a high-pitched jabbering, and he was obviously curious. He went to investigate, and he came face to face with this thing. He said that it looked weakened and sickly, that the jabbering increased, and that suddenly he could hear something telepathically saying, "You need not fear me. I wish to communicate. I come as a friend. We know of you all. I come in peace. I wish medical assistance. I need your help. And at this point, the creature lunged at him, grabbed him, and picked him up in its very strong arms. Frederick, as you could imagine, not really being a fan of this, started finding his skin being pierced with the thorns from its fingers, and it was draining blood from him. And you might think he'd be thrashing around screaming, "Oh, get off me, get off me!" However, he found himself enthralled by the flashing colours in its eyes. And then, just as quickly as it had pounced, this, quote, vegetable man ran up over a hill. Frederick then claimed he'd heard some kind of deep humming, not from the creature this time, coming from behind the hill. And he thought that it was maybe the, quote, ship taking off, which implies it was possibly of extraterrestrial origin, but that was it. No one has seen the Veggie Man again, although I've got to do a video on this in and of itself because it's incredible. But do any of you have any other stories of biological cryptids I could talk about? Because I haven't found much else information, but then again I haven't looked so much. So if you have any of that information, please post it in the comments section. I would love to hear it. I would love to read it. And what do you think about the likelihood these cryptids still exist? I think it's unlikely they exist, but if they do exist, they would either have to be very, very rare or very, very camouflaged, because the alternative is, since no one's seen them for decades, that they could be extinct. And obviously that's the last thing we want. But anyway, please leave your comments in the comment section below. I will see you in the next video and stay tuned.